On the way back to the hospital, Mary had not closed her eyes for 2 days and nights. Inevitably, she was a little tired. Mike looked at Mary, afraid she would get cold, and turn on the air conditioning. But when Mary woke up, Mike acted as if nothing was wrong again. When they got back to the hospital, they found out that their father was still awake. Now all they could do was wait. But what Mike didn't notice was that the housekeeper had followed him to the hospital. Then he called Ruth, although he didn't know who was in the hospital. But from the way Mike was acting, the person inside is very important to him. The words shocked Ruth completely. Thinking about what Mike had just said to him, he seemed to have guessed something. Ruth ordered the butler to keep an eye on Mike. He now left for the hospital. The old tycoon still hadn't awakened. Mary had to stay here with Mike to keep his spirits up. This scene was just seen by Mike. He was a little touched, but he still pretended not to care and said, "You should sit down and rest." These seemingly cold words in Mary's ears, but there is a different feeling. He looked at Mike secretly. When Mike looked at her, Mary hastily averted her eyes again. Then an old man came from the hospital. When Mike thought his father had died, often went to the old man's store to play. As they spent more time together, the two became more like father and son. Whenever Mike was in a bad mood, we'll go to the old man's store to sit. And this time, his father came back from the dead. Mike could not believe the people around him, can only tell him his doubts. For Mike to doubt his mother's approach, the old man also very much agreed. But as an elder, he had one word of advice for Mike to prepare for the worst. "Maybe you've been living a lie since you were a child." While the two men were talking, Mary brought a glass of water. Looking at the beautiful girl in front of him, the old man thought it was Mike's girlfriend. But before he could say anything, the nurse came out to inform the old rich man that he had awakened. Now Mike could meet him, but just as he walked into the room, but he hadn't expected Ruth to be in the hospital. Looking at his sick father, Mike rushed to reassure you that you're going to be okay, Dad. But Rich knew his own health very well. He knew he didn't have much time left. He said to Mike, "I've done nothing wrong in my life. I haven't done anything wrong. Maybe the only thing I did wrong was to have loved your mother. I had no choice back then. They gave me only one solution, and that was to die quietly. That's the only way to keep you safe." And by now Ruth had walked to the door. The rich man was about to continue. Ruth pushed in the door. Looking at her husband who had come back from the dead, Ruth was not only not happy at all, instead her face was filled with horror.